Okay, in conclusion, I want to look at some reform movements in Hinduism and in India itself. Um, and we have this idea that the goal, the ultimate desire, what we all really want, is moksha, is liberation from the cycle of life and death and rebirth. And so we need to be yoked in this, master-disciple relationship. That we need to participate in this yoga, this yoking. We have problems, and reform happens when we meet with internal and external pressures. And reform, I would say, is a response to those pressures that seeks to maintain a clear and obvious connection to the tradition. In other words, it's not a rejection. Reform is not a rejection of the tradition. It's saying we've lost sight of what was. We've lost sight of what's supposed to be. We've gone off track somewhere. So the pressures that lead to reforms in Hinduism come out of the Varna system. Some reformers will say, well, the Varna system was rooted in a different time. At that time, your place and your family of birth actually did have a much stronger impact on your personality, your skill set, and what you did in life. So if the Varna system is kind of about vocation in life, then in ancient times, your vocation in life really was determined by your birth. So maybe it's not that the religion is saying that these Varna are eternal realities, in the sense of what you're born into, you're stuck with. But that's the assumption, because the Varna were explained in a time where the reality of life was what you're born, you're stuck with. So some would say, well, we can see elements of the Varna just in our day in and day out lives. Nonetheless, well, let me clarify. So some people seem to be just fit for some types of jobs. They gravitate to those vocations, and other people gravitate and seem to be skilled for certain other life paths. And so some of your reformers are going to say the Varna are just like that. They're just vocational. Now that we live in a democratic society, we should maintain a sense of Varna, but we should modify it. Some want to say we should get rid of it altogether. But there is a large and growing populace who says, no, it's reactionary. He says, no, the Varna system is essential, and what you're born as is what you're stuck with, and that's your path, your path to rightness, your path to moksha recognizes the Varna system. And remember, it's only the upper three castes as men, once they reach the period of retired or sannyasin, who have any hope in very traditional approaches of ever reaching moksha. If you die in the householder stage, or you die as a student, or you're a woman, or you're from the lowest caste, or you're from the untouchables, then you really have no hope in this lifetime of being, escaping into moksha. Now there again, some of that's going to be rooted in social conditions historically, and we'll get into that. But here again, we talked about the lives of women and the difficulties they face, and the fact that their widowed women are considered so unlucky that often suicide is seen as kind of a path to righteousness through sati, through devotion, right? If you're devoted, if you're a wife and your calling is to be a wife, and you're so devoted to your husband that you'll throw yourself onto his fire, that might be the stepping stone out of kind of the low dregs of life into somewhere from which you could achieve moksha. And that's very problematic. That's going to be, that act of sati is going to be, we'll see, is very important to some of the reform movements. So, in fact, it's Rammohn Roy in the late 1700s, early 1800s. He saw the harmful effects of caste. He saw his sister's death in a sati. He saw her throw herself on her husband's burial pyre. and it shook him, as imaginably so, right? And so he focused on the Upanishads, much like the one that we're reading. It's a focus on meditation and quiet worship and a moral life, not a search for pleasures, not a pursuit of success, but this kind of union with the one God. Also in the late 1800s, Dayananda Saraswati, the Noble Society, used the Vedas, much again like the Veda that we saw about the creation. Is there this one God out there? He wants to move towards a monotheism and a reasoned morality, away from ritual and sacrificial systems and things like that. Strongly influenced by, again, the monotheism of the West. It's not merely a monism, but a movement towards a true monotheism with one supreme God. Still rooted in Hindu society, but rooted in the Vedas, right? So it's not seeking to divorce itself from all of Hinduism. It's just it centralizes this one part of scriptures that focus on the one reality, the one God. And so there's this ideas that the reformers will use is that, look, the earliest Hinduism was in the golden age, the Satya Yuga, the ages. Yugas are ages, and everyone was virtuous, and a caste system under that system was perfect and fine. But now we live in the Kali Yuga, this sort of Iron Age, and there's so much injustice now. Injustice is most of the world, so we can't just continue with this caste system as if the injustices of the age haven't affected things. But these ideas of ages and suffering and the kind of degradation of ages, this is going to contribute to what reformers see as needing to happen. Is there's a desire to get back to an earlier age, and so you have Ramakrishna, though, is a kind of a counter reform, right? He wants to go back to much more traditional Hindu beliefs, but with selective incorporation of Western ideas. He's devoted to Kali, the consort of Shiva, the destroyer. Caste system remains important, but there is a very personal devotion to a personal God with Ramakrishna. Gandhi is probably the most famous reformer, and you should watch the biographical video about Gandhi. Gandhi's influenced by Jesus, and many people say, he was strongly influenced by Christianity. That's what governed his reforms. But remember, I said reformers aren't looking to kind of divorce themselves from the tradition. They're rooted in the tradition. And Gandhi, while he admits to an affinity for Jesus and an interest in the Sermon on the Mount, Gandhi traces his kind of deepest spiritual commitments to the Bhagavad Gita, which is interesting because Gandhi is going to reject the caste system, and he's looking to see women and men and all castes as relatively equal. And much of the Bhagavad Gita, when you read it, you should notice, is about the caste system. It's about doing your duty from within your caste and not doing somebody else's duty. So how does that drive a man towards a sense of total equality? At one point, Gandhi alienated his own followers by trying to get them to do the work of the untouchables. Like his own wife didn't want to clean their bathroom because that was what an untouchable did. This equality thing, dear, can only go so far, was kind of her attitude. But he was dedicated to it. He saw the caste system as creating division and making India weak. yet his drive was his kind of spiritual drive, his spiritual inspiration came from the Bhagavad Gita. And I would argue it's from parts like this, right? He's going to say, he who experiences the unity of life sees his own self in all beings, and all beings in his own self, and looks on everything with an impartial eye. He who sees me in everything and everything in me, him shall I never forsake, nor shall he lose me. The sage who realizes the unity of life and who worships me in all beings, lives in me, whatever may be his lot. This is what drives Gandhi. The Dalit, the woman, the servant, the Brahmin, they're all part of the one ultimate reality. And so they are all deserving of respect and a certain form of equality. Not that people can't have a certain job, but that it should all be respected. Everyone should be respected by the others and treated with a certain level of equality, because all take part, are associated with the one ultimate reality. That's going to be what drives Gandhi in his reforms to a large degree. Though again, he is influenced by, he talks about influences from Jesus' teachings in the Gospels. So that does influence him, but he wants to stay rooted in his Hindu faith, in his Hindu tradition. Another thing he had to read was about Pandita Ramabai. This is a woman reformer, just a very powerful and inspiring woman, born to a Brahmin priestly father, taught to read. You should read her story. But the interesting thing about Pandita brings up another issue, something else that can come kind of in contrast, something to think about, something else that can happen when we meet these pressures and these problems within a faith, is that we see it conversion, right? Pandita converts to Christianity, whereas a Gandhi or one of these others want to draw on aspects of their own tradition to reform their tradition. Pandita is going to say, no, it's kind of irredeemable, and she looks and sees hope in Christianity instead of in Hinduism. She sees, a Jesus who makes his first kind of proclaimers of the gospel, the good news of resurrection, is a group of women. A Jesus who treats women with respect, a Jesus who treats the poor and the wealthy with equality. So that inspires her. But even before her conversion, she's pretty incredible in her movements within Hinduism. Remember, women didn't typically remarry after they were widowed, but she did. Women were expected to kind of get their dignity from their husbands, so a woman would hardly ever want to marry, though this is changing in the modern era. Women rarely wanted to marry somebody of a lower caste, but she did. It was after that she converted to Christianity. So there are these two possible, really these two real prominent realities for those who meet with problems in their faith and tensions within their faith. One is the reformer. The reformer wants to draw on what's in his own tradition and say, no, we've lost track, we've lost sight, we need to get back to, like the one was, we need to get back to these core truths of the Upanishads, or one was, we need to get back to the core truths of the Vedas. Gandhi is saying, we need to get to the understanding that everything is in the one, and the one is in everything, and we should respect everything equally and everyone equally. But then there are those like Pandita who are going to say there's just simply not enough in Hinduism to drive these reforms. She was not alone in that. And there is always the danger of kind of a counter-reformation. Right now in India, there's the Hindutva in modern India, who's seeking to take control and kind of reestablish the centrality of the caste system, and that's it can become very oppressive. So there's often reaction movements to reform movements that kind of push back in the other direction, and we see that. So there are some who are saying, no, there's nothing in Hinduism that can make a modern India that we want. Vishal Mangalwadi is an Indian philosopher who became a Christian, and he teaches that the good things about modern India, the things that Gandhi wanted, and the things that have made an Indian democracy and made it strong and made Indian business thrive were things that were actually brought there by Christian missionaries. So there's this tension there. Um, the reformers are going to say, no, what we need to thrive as a society is found in our own religion, and we're just looking at the wrong parts. We're focusing on the wrong things. We've gotten things out of perspective. Then there are those who convert and move away from their traditional faith and want to say, no, this is wrong. Look at this. Look at what's been done, badly from our own system. This is irredeemable. We need to convert to this other understanding. So those that when we see these tensions in a faith, you'll see it. I've seen it in people who are Christians. I've seen it in Muslims. Will turn to another faith, turn to another religion, or no religion at all, because they see certain ways people use the faith system. Others will say, no, we just need to reform it. We need to go back to what the core was. And reformers are always, the big difference between reformers and converts is the reformers are always trying to look to the tradition. Reformers aren't usually saying, oh, the tradition stinks, this is stupid, we shouldn't do any of this. The reformers are usually saying, no, the tradition itself is wonderful, we've just gotten off track in what parts we focus on. Whereas the converts are saying, no, this doesn't give life, this doesn't give purpose or meaning, and they'll break away and find some other system of belief, some other religion. So things to keep in mind as we study, that those are always things that can happen. We'll see it reforms in just about every religious movement, and that usually has to do with those kind of internal tensions, or maybe what some perceive as a failure to live up to the ideals of the faith.